This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome, everybody, to the GSMC Sports Podcast. I am your host, Mark Souza. Today we'll be talking about many different topics in the world of sports. We'll look at the Thursday night football matchup last night between the Texans and the Dolphins. We'll talk about who performed well in that game, what each team's outlook from here on out looks like. We'll also look at the NBA, as we had some notable games last night, including a big Western Conference matchup between the Lakers and the Nuggets. We'll also take a look at Major League Baseball as we approach games 3, 4, and possibly 5 here in the World Series as we head into the weekend. Of course, our next show will be on Monday, so this series could definitely be over by the next time that we meet. So we'll take a look at those games. We'll see who those pitching matchups would be in 3 and 4, and also, if necessary, a Game 5, which at this point, it's not looking terribly likely we'll see a Game 5, but who knows? It's a lot of baseball to be played. Two really good teams. It's not hard to see the Dodgers winning a couple of these games, maybe one at least this weekend and extending the series. But we will also look at some other news and notes in sports. As one of the biggest sporting rivalries in the entire world will happen this weekend. Maybe not that many Americans are interested to know, but maybe the biggest soccer game in the world will happen this week, and I'll talk about that a little bit, and some sad news in the world of motorsports. So let's kick it off here. Thursday night football, Texans Miami. I think this game provided more entertainment than I really thought it would going in. Very high scoring as the Texans beat Miami 42-23. Although the first half, not a whole lot of points, as it was 14-10 going into halftime by Houston. Miami actually held an early lead in this game, and that lead did not last long, as by the end of the first quarter, Miami was trailing the rest of the game. They did bring it back within 4 points in the third quarter, which was nice to see. But again, in the fourth quarter, we saw the Texans pull away. We saw Deshaun Watson have a great night. Speaking of his great night, 5 touchdown passes. Not the most yardage. He only had to throw the ball 20 times, 16 of 20 for 239 and 5 touchdowns. His counterpart, Brock Osweiler, did not fare so well in this game. 21 of 37, 241 and an INT. So Osweiler, not the greatest game. We will see now if the Dolphins will be going back to Tannehill, if Tannehill will be healthy next week when they host the New York Jets. Will remain to be seen, but I thought if Osweiler had a really good game yesterday, maybe they put kind of doubts in the coaches' heads, and maybe he would get a chance to start even when Tannehill was healthy. But after last night, not that he played terrible, but he wasn't the spark that the team needed. It's easy to see why they would go back to Tannehill, who they started off hot with at the beginning of the season. Speaking of which, the Dolphins dropped to 4-4. They were 4-3 heading into last night's game. So was Houston, but they improved to 5-3. So Lamar Miller, 18 for 133 for Houston and a touchdown. So not a bad day for the former Miami Dolphins running back. Maybe it's a little bit of a revenge game. He is the 8th leading rusher all time for Miami. So a great career with the Dolphins, but Lamar Miller, who's been up and down with the Texans, maybe not the best results. He had a really good game yesterday, And with Deontay Foreman coming off the early season IR, it looks like Wilmar Miller made a case that he should still be the starting running back. I know that the Texans really like Foreman. They used a third-round pick on him. And some people say that Wilmar Miller is not the most explosive player, that they could get better in that position. And those people might be right. So Foreman will most likely get a chance, but Miller at least shows yesterday that, he's a valuable player for this offense. And he might become more valuable later as I have some injury news. But speaking of other players who performed well for Houston, DeAndre Hopkins, 6 catches, 82 yards, 2 touchdowns, including a couple incredible catches. He even had one-handed catch where he kind of bobbled the ball and caught it between his legs. It wasn't a good catch. I mean, it was a good catch, but it came back due to penalty. But, man, it was incredible. Highlight reel worthy. If you haven't seen it, check out the highlights from last night. DeAndre Hopkins is just he's just a different type of animal for these defensive backs. Xavier Howard, maybe currently the best corner in the NFL. There's an argument to be made there, although he's relatively unknown by most casual football fans. He really held his own against DeAndre Hopkins last night, but still, Hopkins ends the day 6 for 82 for 2 touchdowns. Will Fuller, 5 catches, 124 yards, and a touchdown. He did have a great game. He is a type of wide receiver that has these explosive games. He's a super fast receiver. He can get behind the defense, and 5 for 124 and a touchdown. Sad news, though, as it sounds like Will Fuller actually tore his ACL last night. His knee buckled late in that game. He did not return. The initial field tests provided by the Texans suggested that he had a torn ACL, and we're waiting for confirmation this morning on that. So, I hate to be negative, but normally those field tests they're pretty. There's a lot of confidence there. I'd say 95% of the time, maybe even a little higher, when trainers believe that there's a torn ACL based on the initial field test. It usually is. It's uncommon for them to fear a torn ACL and it not be. So wishing him all the best, though. Hopefully it's not. But again, more likely than not it is, and the Texans will have to make do without their young stud receiver that plays opposite of Hopkins. So I don't know how that will affect their offense going forward. Kiki Kuti, he did not play. He was injured last night, but we saw him have a strong start to the season. Kind of came out of nowhere in terms of being a big-time player for this offense. Maybe he is someone who steps in and provides that spark. But if it is, in fact, true that Will Fuller is out for the year, that really does hurt the Texans. And yes, they do have Deontay Foreman coming back at the running back position, but that Hopkins-Fuller 1-2 combo was looking like one of the better ones in the league. So they will miss him for sure. Over on the Miami side, we saw Frank Gore and Kenyon Drake both get 12 carries. Drake for 58 and a touchdown. Gore for 53 yards but did not score. Devontae Parker had a big game for Miami. He's had 134 receiving yards on 6 catches. He played last night like he is a former first-round pick, which he is, but we've seen him, kind of be in the doghouse of Adam Gase, the head coach of the Miami Dolphins. Parker played last night pretty exclusively out there at wide receiver, basically because of injury. Kenny Stills had been ruled out of the game. Albert Wilson had been put on IR. So Devontae Parker was really the only true outside receiver. They did have Jakeem Grant, but he's more of a return man, secondary receiver, somebody you like to line up all over the place, but not necessarily a true wide receiver in the NFL. Danny Amendola, 5 catches for 43 yards. We saw him have a couple good games before this one heading in. Amendola, a strong slot receiver, but again, when you're missing weapons, when you're playing from behind, it makes it easier for the defenses to focus on you. And, Osweiler going up against that rush, J.J. Watt, Jadeveon Clowney, they make their presence felt. They make quarterbacks uncomfortable. And they force incompletions. And all in all, the Dolphins, they get ran out of town as Deshaun Watson throws those 5 touchdown passes. It was, like I mentioned, 16 out of 20, very efficient. 239 for the yardage for Watson. He didn't need to throw a lot as Lamar Miller did a lot of groundwork there in moving the ball, but 5 touchdown passes. So we look at Houston, we look at Miami. I feel like their outlooks are completely different at this point. I talked yesterday about how the Texans had a real chance to take the AFC South by the scruff of the neck with some of these floundering teams like Tennessee, Jacksonville. Both of those teams are 3-4. Indianapolis is 2-5. So Houston gets a win up on the division. We'll see if they're 1 or 2 games up on their counterparts after this Sunday. But 5-3, they're looking good right now. They go to Denver next week to face the Denver Broncos. A very winnable football game as the Broncos themselves are 3-4, and they play Kansas City this weekend. But with the extra few days of rest for Houston, yes, they might have Will Fuller out for the rest of the season, but you got to like where you're at with Houston as Watson is looking comfortable coming off of that torn ACL from last season. DeAndre Hopkins is looking like DeAndre Hopkins every single week for Houston. But for Miami, the outlook I don't think is so good. 4-4 now. They started off 3-0. So, I mean, you could do the math there. They're 1-4 in their last 5 games. They always felt like they were fool's gold at the beginning, even going 3-0. But you only can play the teams that are put in front of you, and if you win those games, you win those games. So you can't really take anything away from them. However, we are seeing a different team. They win on opening Sunday for them. They beat Tennessee. We thought at that time that was a really good win. That was a game that lasted 7 or 8 hours, I believe, due to flood or due to lightning and thunder in the area. So that game was maybe the longest game that I can recall, as they had to delay that particular game twice. You see the Dolphins beat the Jets following week, and then they beat the Raiders. So as we look at it now, none of those 3 wins are necessarily good wins, quote unquote, but in recent weeks, you get trounced by New England. You get beat by 10 by Cincinnati. You beat the Bears in overtime, which is a good win there. You lose to the Lions at home by 11, and now the Texans by 19. You can see why this Dolphins team is trending in the wrong direction at this point. Next on their slate, they host the Jets. After that, they travel to Green Bay. They travel to Indianapolis before hosting the Bills. So these next 4 games are critical for Miami. If they want to remain in the AFC playoff conversation, I would say 2-2 would be okay. 3-1 would be ideal. Anything less than that could see them fall off. They're not winning the division, as that division belongs to New England like it has for pretty much every season over the last 20 years. But we'll see what the Dolphins can do. Other than that, we look at the NFL this weekend. There is a lot of games on the slate, of course, as it's Week 8. Eagles, Jaguars, both 3-4. Another team, we just talked about the AFC South for the Texans. The Jaguars play the Eagles. That's a tough game, but they will host Philadelphia, who also needs a win. Both teams are at 3-4. I will be circling that game as a notable game. I think the loser is looking at no playoffs this year. The winner, they have a good chance to right their ship and get back into the playoff hunt. Other games, Jets, they travel to Chicago to face the Bears. Interesting game there as we see 2 young quarterbacks, Trubisky and Darnold. Trubisky's been on a tear lately. The Bears have been up and down, but his play has seemed to elevate. Let's see if he can take advantage of a Jets secondary that can't allow a lot of points or a lot of receiving yards and touchdowns. So Seahawks and Lions is another game that I'm circling. 2, 3, and 3 teams. I talked yesterday on my football podcast about how I feel like this is an elimination game, a very early season elimination game in the NFL, in the NFC, because the NFC is so competitive. I feel like if you go to 3-4 in Week 7, that you're behind the 8 ball more than you would be normally in a 3-4 season. As the NFC, it looks like everybody's in except for 3 teams: Arizona, the Giants, and the 49ers. Pretty much everybody else in the NFC has an argument right now, has a shout out why they should be playoffs or why they can make the playoffs. So a big game between those 2 NFC foes, as Detroit will host the Seattle Broncos. We'll travel to face the Patrick Mahomes show in Kansas City with Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt, Travis Kelce. Very tough game for Denver. They're 3-4. Vance Joseph, it sounds like his seat might be getting a little warm, so if he goes to 3-5, I could see it even getting warmer. Redskins, they have an NFC East rivalry game as they travel to New Jersey to face the Giants. Redskins will travel to play the New York Football Giants. Will this be Eli's last game as a starting quarterback? There are rumors, there are reports that the Giants really want to see what they have in their rookie quarterback, Alex Tanney. Of course, he wasn't a top pick in the draft, but a young quarterback that they might want to see at least in a lost season. You see what you have on your roster, and I don't blame them. Browns, they face Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh. Baker Mayfield, he'll get a chance to face the Steelers and, step into this rivalry. Not much of a rivalry over the last, 20, 30 years, but, I can see the Browns really getting up for this game. But speaking about coaches that have a warmer seat, Hugh Jackson sounds like he might be on his way out. I'm not sure how he lasted this long, to be honest with you, but he's here. So, Ravens and Panthers. Carolina, I know the Ravens are on the road, but I wouldn't be surprised if they win this game. Cam Newton is one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL against the blitz, and the Ravens blitz a lot. So look for that to be a factor. Look for Cam to get sacked a few times, maybe make some mistakes. But I can see the Ravens defense really strangling the Panthers offense here. But again, those are two over 500 teams. The Ravens are 4-3, Panthers 4-2. Colts will travel out west to face the Raiders, which is interesting. The Raiders are having a lot of turmoil. First game since the Amari Cooper trade. The Colts have been playing well. They could get their 3rd win. We will see what happens. There might be a lot of drama out in Oakland this weekend. Maybe the game of the day, although I think there's 2 NFC matchups that are crucial this week, and we'll start with the Packers traveling out west to the West Coast to face the Los Angeles Rams and their flying circus. Sean McVay has that offense running on all cylinders. Sounds like Cooper Kupp will not play, but with the other weapons they have, Robert Woods, Brandon Cooks, Todd Gurley, of course, the Rams are flying high, and the Packers will look to stop them. 7-0 Rams, of course, still the only undefeated team in the NFL. I don't see that train stopping this week, if I'm being completely honest, because I just do not see that offense for LA slowing down. The night game, though, everybody's talking about. Saints at Vikings, a rematch of that divisional playoff game last year where Stephon Diggs catches that touchdown on the sideline. Improbable. Not sure what the Saints safety was doing on that play, but that play will be remembered for being a game-winning catch. And Stephon Diggs, I guess, showing up to the rest of the world, putting his mark in the NFL and in NFL history. So exciting game. 5-1 Saints, 4-2-1 Vikings. So we can see that the Vikings really need this one as they want to remain in conversation for not just playoffs, but for the NFC North Division title. Some other games that are happening this weekend: Bucks and Bengals, 49ers and Cardinals. Seems like those games have a little bit less importance than maybe some others. And of course, Monday night, Patriots will travel to face the Bills. I'm not sure how. I don't think they can flex the Monday night game, but if they could, they probably would have flexed the Packers-Rams to Monday and move the Patriots and Bills. Sounds like Derek Anderson will start again for the Bills, which, yeah, 14-point favorite is New England, so you can be the judge of that. So we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about the NBA last night. We'll talk about the 4 games that happened. Between two of those matchups had playoff teams from last year. We'll talk about Jimmy Butler, the latest in the Jimmy Butler saga. So we'll do those things right when we come back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And we're back here at the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, your host, Mark Souza. Thank you for joining me today. In the first segment, we did go over Thursday Night Football and Week 8 in the NFL, what the matchups are, who we think will win, and, of course, which notable games you should be paying attention to. Now we'll shift our focus to the National Basketball Association. So we had 4 games, not that many games, but 4 games last night that happened in the NBA, plus some interesting rumors, some interesting news in the NBA. I did talk about yesterday how James Harden might miss a couple games for the Rockets due to a hamstring strain, and I did want to mention that the Rockets do, in fact, plan on holding him out for the next 2 games, which will give him about a week of rest. So a nice little break between games there for the Rockets, or they're afforded that ability. So keep that in mind when you check out the Rockets games over the course of the next week. So moving on. Last night, the Los Angeles Lakers coming on off the back-to-back from the night before they had defeated Phoenix. They host the Denver Nuggets, and they win 121-114. Impressive win for LA, considering it was the second night of a back-to-back. 121-114 again. Denver suffers their first defeat this season. That team has been off to a hot start. We know that the Nuggets had beat Golden State already this season. So for the Nuggets, Jokic 24 points, Jamal Murray had 22. They shoot 50%, 26% from 3. That might have been their undoing there. But as we take a look at the Lakers side, LeBron James 17 attempts, but he gets 28 points out of that 17. So 28 points, 11 boards, 11 assists for the King James, as he leads the Lakers to a win. They are now 2-3. Lonzo Ball got another start last night, 12 points, 6 boards, 8 assists. Again, as the Lakers were playing without their two starters, I guess you could say. Brandon Ingram and Rajon Rondo, as they're still suspended by the league. Rondo should have one more game, I believe, and Ingram too. So the Lakers are finding ways to win a couple games here without having a full-strength squad, but we will see those players return here in the coming days. We know that Los Angeles has another meeting with the Spurs, second time that they'll play in the first 2 weeks of the NBA season. Spurs, Timberwolves, and Mavericks are on the slate for the Lakers heading into this weekend and into next. So, moving on. The Oklahoma City Thunder, searching for their first win. They come into the game 0-3. They host Boston on TNT, so they're on primetime television. They carried a lead as the Celtics were down by 16 points, at halftime. Celtics have a huge third quarter where they outscore the Thunder 40-23. They take the lead into the fourth. The Thunder regain the lead up by 5 with 4 minutes left. But it's the Celtics that outlast Oklahoma City 101-95. And very frustrating, I think, if you're a Thunder fan. as the team goes to 0-4 very early in the season, but we know that you can't start off. You don't want a very slow start to tank your whole season. This is a team that has, of course, playoff hopes. Paul George, Russell Westbrook. I mean, they're probably looking at a top 4, top 5 seed as their goal coming into the season. They're now 0-4. They find themselves at the bottom of the West, tied for the worst record in basketball. So I'm not so sure what to make the Thunder. I wonder if we'll see some big changes coming up. Their schedule, I will say their schedule gets easier, but they did lose to the Clippers and the Sacramento Kings already. They do host the Suns and the Clippers here in the next 4 days. So that's two potential wins. Maybe that will boost them into kind of turning their season around, their early season struggles at least. But yeah, just not the start that you're looking for OKC. Another Western Conference team with playoff hopes, the Portland Trailblazers. 128-114 winners against the Orlando Magic. Damian Lillard, 41 points. He had 7 at halftime. He finishes with 41. I've seen this man play. I've seen him in person. When he gets hot, it's over. He can shoot from anywhere on the court. Maybe he doesn't have the Steph Curry range, but I'll tell you, when he gets hot, he can knock down pretty much every single shot within 27, 28 feet. So 34 second half points as Portland dominates Orlando. They improved to 3-1. Lillard had 41, 7, and 6. McCollum 22, 2 and 2. But yeah, only 3 other Blazers were in double figures in scoring. But you get 41 from your point guard. It's usually a good sign of success. As for the Magic, they fall to 2 and 3. They're led by Vucevic, their center, 24 points, 11 rebounds, so a double-double for him. Aaron Gordon, 17 and 4. Jonathan Isaac continues his disappointing run as an NBA player. We all know he's the highly touted prospect from Florida State last year. 10 points on 8 shots, 30 minutes, 7 rebounds. He just hasn't had a big impact on the league to date. He's still very young, as I believe he's 20 years old. So another rookie for the Magic, Mo Bamba, 20 minutes off the bench, 8 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 of 5 shooting. I've really liked what I've seen from Mo Bamba because his offensive game looks a little bit more fluid than I thought it would be, at least initially. So I have been impressed by the way he handles the ball, his ability to be efficient scoring the basketball. I think he plays with himself. We saw him attempt a 3 last night. It didn't work out for him, but I'm not so sure he can't make that shot every once in a while. So the last game that was on yesterday's slate is the surprising Detroit Pistons. They win 110-103 against Cleveland. You know, Detroit's an interesting team. When I did my preseason NBA podcast predictions, we talked about, if you haven't checked that out, GSMC Podcast Network, our basketball podcast every Tuesday and Thursday. When I did my predictions for what would happen this season in the East and you know what I saw happening, I did have Detroit as, I believe, my 8th seed, and I still wasn't extremely confident about that. I didn't really know what to expect, but man, they've been looking really sharp. 4-0. On the other side, Cleveland, they dropped 0-5 again. They just can't seem to win with this team that's without LeBron James. It's reminding me of the first time LeBron left Cleveland, how that team fell apart. Ended up having the worst record in the league the next season. It's heading that way because you look at this Cleveland team, they have veterans on the team. It's the veterans that were left behind. And you see this team, it's not a young team. They got Colin Sexton in the draft, of course, but it's not a young team. It's a team with guys like, Kevin Love, George Hill, Tristan Thompson, Rodney Hood, Jordan Clarkson, Kyle Korver. These are veteran NBA players, so I'm not sure what to think about their season. I don't see them winning over 25 games at this point. just because when you start that bad, it's easy to kind of get in, kind of let this thing spiral out of control. Their next 2 games are against the Pacers and the Hawks. So Cleveland gets Pacers and the Hawks. Those are winnable games, but maybe not the Pacers game for this Cleveland team, but the Hawks definitely. So we'll see what happens there. But the big news out of last night in the NBA, Adrian Wojnarowski, as we know, he reports on a lot of activity in the NBA, trade rumors, things like that. He's regarded as one of the best in the game when it comes to breaking news. Well, he reported yesterday that the Houston Rockets are willing to part ways with 4 first-round draft picks for the rights of Jimmy Butler. So let that sink in for a moment. 4 first-round draft picks. That seems incredibly high. That seems like an incredibly high price for a player, a 29-year-old two-way player like Jimmy Butler. Very good. Nothing to take away from him, but he's also a pending free agent, so I'm not sure if this deal would require a sign and trade, like a max deal, sign and trade type thing. But the Rockets, it sounds like, are realizing that their window is now. If they don't have 2 or 3 years to wait out this Warriors run, that they have to fight fire with fire, I think Jimmy Butler would be a great addition for the Rockets, honestly. I mean, like I mentioned, he's a two-way player. He can score, he can defend. I think he would be a player that could really help the Rockets in their attempt to chase down Golden State as the team in the West, maybe the best team in the league. Problem that I have is it's 4 first-round picks. Chris Paul's a little bit older. He has a couple years left, and I think that's why the urgency here is for Butler for the Rockets to try and acquire Jimmy Butler now. But with these draft picks, we saw how crippled the Nets were when they made that trade with the Boston Celtics and sent all those legendary players, those older legendary Celtics, to the Nets. It crippled them for the better part of a decade. We're still seeing the ripple effect from that trade with the Nets. They're getting better. They're getting back to respectability in the NBA, but still they're behind because of all the assets they had to give up for that trade. So 4 first-round picks. In the NBA, the rule is you cannot trade back-to-back first-round picks. So if this deal were to happen, what you need to know is it will not be 2019, 20, 21, 22. No. There would need to be a year in between each one of those. So you're looking over the course of 7 years. In fact, in the NBA, there are rules that you can only trade first rounds up into the next 7 years, and there has to be a break between each year. So this is the maximum first-round picks that a team can actually send over to another team. They would be capping out the amount and the time. So would it be a good trade for Houston? I don't know. I can see it. I can see the urgency. I understand exactly why they would make a move like this. But would it hurt them 4 or 5 years from now? Absolutely. If you're picking in the later first round anyways, you're not too worried about it. But you got to believe that at least one of these draft picks that's being traded over will be during a year that the Rockets are rebuilding. Maybe Harden moves on in 4 or 5 years. Maybe Paul's retired. Maybe Jimmy Butler's retired. Heck, maybe James Harden is retired. We don't know. We don't know if there's major injuries that will happen. It does put you at risk. If you have a bad season, it could really change your outlook for 4 or 5 years. So is it worth it? It's a good question. Is it risky? Absolutely. I do like the aggressive approach by Rockets general manager Daryl Morey. We know that he's not afraid to do things, maybe go against the grain. We saw him bring in Carmelo, which I will say I was not the biggest fan of, but I understood his point of view, needing a scorer, needing a veteran player, wanting to add another piece, and at that point, there wasn't too much available out there in the free agency market or in the trade market. So if you add Butler to this team, do I think that they're better than the Warriors? No. But I would say that they could absolutely be a top 2 team in the West with this move. as we've seen them struggle early on in the season. Harden's now a little gimpy with his hamstring, and they want to be careful with that. So as of right now, just Chris Paul-led team. Let's see if they can, play okay for the next couple games and maybe squeak out a win or two. But it is a risky proposition. We'll see in the coming days if this deal goes down. It sounds like next Wednesday is a crucial day to see if this trade goes down, because the Rockets have a couple players that they recently acquired who have become eligible for trades on Wednesday. One of them includes the young forward Marquise Chris, who's now in his third year in the NBA. We'll see if he gets moved in this deal. I would assume that Minnesota would want some young pieces in return for Jimmy Butler in addition to the draft pick. So key date again. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about Major League Baseball and the World Series. Tonight, Game 3 in LA resumes the 7-game series. Will it go to 7? I'm not so sure. But we'll talk about those games and those matchups in detail right after this break.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA, from the UFC to extreme cage fighting. They got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
And thank you for returning for segment 3 of the Sports Podcast, the GSMC Sports Podcast, of course. Check out the GSMC Podcast Network. MMA, football, baseball, soccer. We have it all here for you, including other things outside of the realm of sports. But we're going to shift our focus now as we look into Major League Baseball in the World Series. Red Sox have a commanding 2-0 lead in the series as we saw them really lay down the law out in Boston against the Dodgers. We saw Kershaw struggle. We saw the Red Sox hitters not struggle. And this series will now shift to LA, where the weather is a lot nicer than what we saw in Boston, as we saw 40 to low 40s in the temperatures. It was a little chilly out there. But I did want to talk about how this World Series has terrible ratings. I mean, I'm not sure what to make of this, but we see a lot of news sources reporting about the 4-year low in ratings for baseball, the World Series ratings dip, and it's actually pretty crazy to me. I'm very surprised. Now, I will say that we are in a day and age where I believe that it's incredibly hard to gauge how many people are watching what with the amount of different services that you have for television, cutting the cord, watching things online, legit websites, illegit websites. It's hard, in my opinion, to get these ratings right. We talk about the NFL. One of the news stories that's been going on the last couple of years during the national anthem kneeling NFL saga is the low ratings, but we see the NFL kill it still. Have the ratings decline? Sure. But have ratings decline across every show, all shows that are on television? Yes. A lot of people don't realize that. The numbers for people watching TV has gone down, so it would only make sense that sports would also go down. as with most programming. Well, with that being said, the NFL is still killing it when it comes to ratings. Every month, they're still dominating the top 50 most watched programs of the month, usually at 30, 35 of the top programs, which is absolutely insane. We see Thursday Night Football just dominate against baseball, against basketball. But I am surprised considering the fact that it is Los Angeles and it is Boston. We're talking about one team from each coast, two big cities, two teams with storied history. And I talked about it before that, when the Brewers were in the NLCS, that it would be baseball would want a Dodgers Red Sox type of World Series, not a Brewers Astros. But it's hard as I didn't see this coming. The last time the ratings were this low was 2014 when the Giants from San Francisco faced the Kansas City Royals. I think, Kansas City, not a big market. San Francisco is, but still, it wasn't the most exciting series matchup for baseball fans. But to think that the Red Sox Dodgers got that small of ratings is not great. Game 2 of the World Series it was a little bit better overnight rating, but still, it's still down. So I'm really not sure why that is. I mean, obviously people are watching less TV, or at least less TV that's recorded. So that's a big deal. But man, we're talking about these two teams, and plus on top of it, the Red Sox in their historic season. I mean, for baseball fans, for baseball traditionalists, this is great. I mean, this is entertaining. But we'll see if those ratings pick up. Game 3 tonight in LA, 5 o'clock Pacific time. First pitch, 5:09. The Red Sox and the Dodgers. And we have Rick Porcello for the Red Sox against Walker Buehler, the young pitcher for the Dodgers, who was a Game 7 winner against the Milwaukee Brewers. So, who has the edge here? Porcello, I mean, I feel like he has a lot of confidence. He has a lot of experience. We've seen him pitch out of the bullpen. We've seen him start. Buehler had been a little shaky, but his last start has to give him supreme confidence heading into tonight's matchup. The Red Sox, I don't know if JD Martinez starts in the field or if he comes off the bench as a pinch hitter. The Dodgers will get to employ a lot of their left-handed hitters tonight as they face two lefties in the first two games, which their manager Dave Roberts talked about how he is excited to have guys in the lineup and have better matchups. Guys like Cody Bellinger, a lefty, he gets to see right-handed pitching. For me, it all comes down to the Boston Red Sox lineup. I think both lineups are very good, but they're just relentless. 1 through 9. We'll see if Rick Porcello can handle the bat. So maybe 1 through 8, I should say. But regardless, I just don't know if the Dodgers can win more than one game the remainder of the series. Game 4 is Eovaldi against Ridge Hill. That seems like a game the Dodgers can have. That pitching matchup right there, I see that there's a big enough advantage for the Dodgers. I know Eovaldi's had a very good season. He was an incredible pickup for the Red Sox, but I think Ridge Hill at home, he's tough. He's tough. So I think the Dodgers get one of the next two games to extend it to Game 5. If it does go to Game 5, we'll have Clayton Kershaw for Los Angeles. We know that he did not fare well in his last matchup against the Red Sox. He may have a chance to redeem himself. If it goes to 5th game, Kershaw, Chris Sale, they'll battle again in Los Angeles. If LA happens to win one or two of these games, then we'll head back east to Boston. But I think there's I would say there's a 60 to 75% chance that this series ends this weekend, with the Red Sox taking it, of course. But we'll see tonight what happens. I think the key is for the Dodgers to come out and score early. You don't want to get behind against the Red Sox. I talked about this before. It's not even necessarily that they have a fantastic bullpen, although we saw their bullpen do really well, especially in the last game, just shut down the Dodgers when they had the lead. They didn't give up any hits, any runs at all. So Dodgers, of course, as we mentioned before last game, they only had hits in one inning, fourth inning, 3 hits. They did not get a hit in any other inning of that game. But it's all about the hitters for Boston. That's why I don't think you can get behind on them, because you go down 1 or 2 runs against Boston, it can quickly become 3-4 runs, as we saw in Game 1. Boston was up 1, Nunez comes in, 3-run homer, game over. You don't want to see that if you're the Dodgers. You don't want to be climbing uphill the entire series. The Dodgers need to get leads in these games if they expect to win at home, if they expect to make a series out of this. It starts tonight against Rick Porcello. It should be, it's a good pitching matchup. I think this is a very underrated pitching matchup. So if you're a fan of baseball, if you're not sure what to expect tonight, I don't know if we're going to see a whole lot of runs. I don't think we won't see any, but I would say a normal type score, which is weird to say because you have 2 teams that can really hit the baseball. Neither team really put up a ton of runs last game, but in Game 1 there was a lot of runs scored. There's 12, so last game 6, I would say somewhere in the middle. I like Boston. I think Boston will win this game. I think a score of like 5-4 most likely will happen tonight. It's just, I want to see the Dodgers make this a series. I want to see them grind this one out. I want to see this series shift back to Boston. I think it also would be cool that if Boston did win the World Series in this historic season for them, that they did it at home. But in order to do that, the Dodgers got to win twice this weekend as they're down 2-0 in the series. So I'm not sure what to think. I also kind of believe if Boston wins tonight, they win tomorrow as well. It's one of those things. Dodgers win tonight, I could see them winning tomorrow as well. Heck, maybe they even win on Sunday. But it all starts tonight. They know they have to have it. Dave Roberts knows he has to have it. I think we'll see an inspired Dodgers team. I bet the crowd will be very into it. LA Dodger fans are notoriously late to games. It's a 5:09 Pacific Standard Time first pitch, which is about 2.5 hours earlier than normal for Dodgers fans who attend games, as West Coast starting pitch times are usually about 7:30. So we'll see what kind of crowd we have at the beginning of the game. As we know, LA is notorious for having late arriving fans, but I expect those fans to be loud. I expect them to pump the Dodgers up as best as possible. But again, it's one of those things where if you go behind early, your team and your fans start having doubts. It can get real quiet. So it's imperative that the Dodgers start fast in this game. I think they need to get a run or 2 in the first 2 or 3 innings. They need to get a lead. Pitch with a lead, I think, is something we need to see if they're going to be successful. But that's the World Series outlook for Games 3, 4, and 5. We're going to go to a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk about some notable college football games that will be happening this weekend. We'll also talk about the biggest football rivalry in the world. No, not American football. Soccer. So, talk about that for a moment. And some sad news in the world of motorsports. So, I'll be right back.
Are you looking for help for your fantasy football team? Check out the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Get today's best advice on who to start, who to sit, even who you should draft. From sleeper picks to red-hot lineups, they got it all covered for you. That's gsmcpodcast.com/fantasy-football-podcast. We'll cover traditional leagues, dynasty, PPR, even IDP leagues. When you need fantasy help, there's just one show to hit up. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
And thank you for returning to the GSMC Sports Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Mark Souza, and we are in the last segment. So we discussed the Thursday night football matchup between the Texans and the Dolphins, where the Texans routed Miami. We talked about the NBA. The Lakers got a big win last night. James Harden's hurt. Jimmy Butler, is he on the move? 4 first-round picks, is that too much? We talked about the World Series, games 3, 4, and 5 that will happen this weekend in LA. I should say 3 and 4 will happen. Game 5 will happen if necessary, of course. And now we'll shift our focus to news and notes around the world. And we start with one of the biggest rivalries in the world, not just soccer, but in all of sports. The rivalry between Madrid, Real Madrid, of course, and Barcelona. A storied rivalry called El Clásico. These two teams, in their history, they have played each other for over 100 years. They're separated by 2 wins. It's been an incredible rivalry, one that's seen a lot of political thoughts and political motivations for this, as Real Madrid has always represented the Spanish monarchy, and Barcelona has always represented Catalonia and their fight for independence. So we look at this game, it's more than a game. Camp Nou is the site, Sunday. This will be the first game since 2007 where a El Clásico will not feature Lionel Messi or Cristiano Ronaldo. It's a long time, 11 years since it's happened. Ronaldo, as we know, has been sold to Juventus, where he's been playing this season for the Italian giant. And Messi, he fractured his arm, so he's out 3 to 4 weeks. He's in the second week of that, so he's out. Madrid has been playing very poorly. We'll see what happens in this game, but if you're a fan of this sport, there's no bigger game than El Clásico when it comes to club domestic football. So moving on. We have college football this weekend. Some notable matchups. Clemson, number 2 ranked team in the country, they face Florida State. Florida State, as we know, they've had a tough season. But can they salvage something here as they host Clemson? Can they salvage a good season? They're 4-3, unranked. This could boost them. This could rank them. We'll see. Florida will travel to Georgia in an SEC rivalry matchup. Number 9 Florida, number 7 Georgia. This might be the game of the weekend for me. One of these teams is definitely destined to be knocked out of the top 10. One of these teams could be catapulted into the top 6. But Georgia's coming off a bye. It should be a very strong game. I mean, we're talking about 2 teams that can play defense. We're talking about 2 offenses that are good. Both come in at 6-1. So we'll see what happens there. But again, this is a huge game to decide the fate of the SEC. Another notable matchup between 2 ranked teams, Iowa and Penn State. 6-1 Iowa, number 18. Number 17 Penn State at 5-2. Can McSorley lead the Nittany Lions to a win at home against the Hawkeyes? We will see. Penn State, of course, they're the favorite in this game, a touchdown favorite. I don't know. I sort of like Iowa in this matchup, though, because their defense is a little bit better. But Penn State's offense, of course, is a little bit better, too. So, interesting game, as one of these teams will look to jump in the top 15, probably closer to the top 10. Maybe not crack top 10, but get in pretty close there. And then a Pac-12 battle, as Washington State, again, is in another big game. 6-1, Washington State ranked 14. But this time, they will not be in the comforts of their own home. They will travel to the Bay Area, Palo Alto, as they face Stanford. Stanford Cardinal ranked 24. They come in at 5-2. Washington's riding that big wave of the win last week against Oregon. So, Stanford is not a team that really wows people in terms of the way they play. They don't put up a lot of points. Washington State, they score a little bit. I like Washington State on the road here. I think it'll be a tough game, though. Stanford is not an easy task at all, but I could definitely see Washington State winning this game. But that really looks about it when it comes to college football. There are some other games, of course, but in terms of notable games, those are the ones that I mentioned that look the most appealing. Oklahoma, number 8, they host Kansas State. Could be an interesting game there. Oregon and Arizona. Again, Oregon drops to 19 in the polls, so they play unranked Arizona. Number 6, Texas. They travel to Oklahoma State. So, other than that, moving on. Yeah, last note from college football. Running back John Emery has decommitted from Georgia unexpectedly. So, the number 1 recruit in the country has decommitted from the University of Georgia. So an interesting turn of events. We'll see where he lands. He had previously turned down other schools such as LSU, most notably for Georgia. So we will see if where he picks, what changes will be made for his future. He did talk about just taking a step back and reassessing his future and his goals. So sad news in the IndyCar world. Driver Robert Wickens, he was injured on August 19th when he had a serious crash at Pocono Raceway. He has confirmed that he is paralyzed from the waist down. So, a sad story as he, again, had a serious crash at Pocono. His car flipped in the air a few times, broke his neck, suffered other injuries, broken bones, but none bigger than the fact that he's paralyzed from the waist down. He did confirm that on his social media accounts last night. So, video of him using his arms to help himself onto a wheelchair. So, a sad story. He was a rookie driver, 29 years old. So, our thoughts go out to him. Hope, great things in his recovery. He talked about fighting this thing head on and hoping to walk one day. So, positive thoughts go his way as he continues this fight. He begins, I should say, this incredible fight that he has in front of him. Other than that, we're going to wrap up today's show with that. So, again, NFL, some big matchups this weekend, some big NFC matchups. Major League Baseball, games 3 and 4, today and tomorrow, possibly game 5 on Sunday. There's a whole weekend of viewing pleasure for you. So, get up early, mow the lawn, rake the leaves, make sure your wife is happy, make sure your husband is happy, and then get yourself in front of the television. You know what? Maybe do some chores while you're watching these games. Me and my wife just recently decided to do our laundry folding while watching these games, and I have to say, happy wife, happy life. So it's little things like that you can get away with watching sports all day if you do a chore here and there and mix and incorporate those things while you're watching TV. You don't have to take your eyeballs off. It's amazing, let me tell you. So we'll see you back on Monday. Again, I'll have my co-host, Jeff Malinoff. He'll be back with me. But thank you again for listening, and you have yourselves a great weekend.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.